Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I never thought a girls' trip would be the thing that cracked my marriage open, but looking back, it was never really about the trip. It was about control, fear, and the quiet distance that had been growing between James and me for years. I'm Elizabeth, 36, married for 11 years, and until recently, I believe compromise was the same thing as love. The idea of the trip started harmlessly. A long weekend in Scottsdale with 3 friends I'd known since college. No wild plans, no secrets. Just sun, conversations without interruption, and a break from routines that had begun to feel like obligations. When I mentioned it to James over dinner, he didn't look up from his phone. He just said, "I don't think that's a good idea." No explanation, just a flat statement, like a decision had already been made. I laughed at first, assuming he was joking. But when I asked why, he finally looked at me, his expression tight. "You don't need to be going off like that," he said. "Married women don't do girls' trips." The words landed heavier than he probably intended, or maybe exactly as intended. If you've ever been told what you should do instead of ask what you want, hit like so this story can reach others who felt that way too. I tried to reason with him. I reminded him that he went on golf weekends with his friends twice a year, that I never questioned it. He shrugged and said it was different. When I asked how, he accused me of starting drama. That was James' favorite phrase whenever a conversation drifted toward my feelings. Drama, as if wanting space was a performance. Over the next few days, the tension thickened. He'd drop comments casually, like reminders. "You know how things can look." Or, "I don't trust the environment." He never said he didn't trust me. He didn't have to. The implication sat between us, unspoken but loud. At this point, I want to know, do you think trust needs rules, or does it exist without them? Share your thoughts in the comments. The night before I was supposed to book the flight, he made his position clear. "If you go," he said, "don't expect things to be the same when you get back." It wasn't shouted. That made it worse. Calm ultimatums don't feel like anger. They feel like certainty. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, realizing how often I'd chosen peace by choosing silence. By morning, something in me had shifted. I booked the ticket. I didn't do it to punish him or prove a point. I did it because I needed to know what would happen if, for once, I chose myself. When I told him, his face hardened. He didn't argue. He just nodded once and said, "Do what you want." The way he said it made it sound like permission, but it felt like dismissal. The trip itself was uneventful in the way healing often is. Long walks, early mornings, honest conversations with women who knew my history better than anyone. I didn't flirt. I didn't hide. I even sent James photos, updates, small attempts at connection. He replied with short messages. Polite, distant, like a co-worker. If you've ever felt someone pull away the moment you stopped obeying, type the word distance in the comments. On the third night, sitting by the pool, I realized how light I felt. Not because I was away from my husband, but because no one was monitoring my choices. That realization scared me more than anything else. I went back to the hotel room and called James. It rang until voicemail. I didn't leave a message. When I landed home 2 days later, the house was quiet in a way that didn't feel temporary. His car was gone. Some of his clothes were missing from the closet. On the kitchen counter was an envelope with my name written neatly across the front. Before you read on, consider sharing this story with someone who might recognize these signs before it's too late. I stood there longer than I should have, keys still in my hand, realizing that whatever James had decided while I was gone, it wasn't impulsive. It was planned. And in that moment, I understood something I'd avoided for years. The trip didn't change him. It revealed. I opened the envelope slowly, half expecting an explanation, half expecting nothing at all. Inside was a single sheet of paper, not a letter, not an apology, just a printed list. Dates, bank transfers, notes in James's handwriting, household expenses, joint savings, personal contributions. At the bottom, one sentence. Since you chose independence, Finances will now reflect that choice. My hands went cold. It took a few seconds to understand what I was looking at. He hadn't left me. Not officially. He had restructured our marriage while I was gone. That night, he didn't come home. I checked my phone repeatedly, not because I missed him, but because I needed clarity. The next morning, I logged into our shared account. It was still there, but frozen. My access restricted. My salary, which had always gone into our joint pool, was untouched, but everything else was locked behind passwords I didn't have. James had always handled the technical stuff. I trusted him. That trust now felt naive. He finally called that afternoon. His voice was calm, almost instructional. He said he wasn't angry. He said he'd had time to think. While I was living like I was single, he decided to reset boundaries. I don't want a divorce, he said, but I won't be disrespected. I asked him how taking a trip translated to disrespect. He paused and said, "You didn't listen." That was his final answer. As the call ended, I felt something settle inside me. Not fear, not sadness, understanding. Control had always been framed as concern, restriction as protection. And I had accepted it because it was quiet, because it didn't bruise, because it came wrapped in responsibility. At this point, I'm curious. Do you see this as boundaries or punishment? Join the discussion in the comments and explain why. Over the next week, James stayed with his brother. He texted practical things only. Bills, schedules, no emotion, no questions about how I was doing. I met with a lawyer on Friday, more to understand my position than to escalate anything. She listened carefully, then told me something that echoed in my head all weekend. Financial control is still control, she said, even when it's calm. When James came home on Sunday, he acted like we were negotiating a contract. He laid out expectations, transparency, approval. No more surprises, he said. I listened without interrupting, then asked one question. What happens if I say no? He looked at me, genuinely confused, as if that option hadn't been considered. That silence told me everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I told him I was done living in a marriage where my freedom was conditional. He responded by reminding me of everything he provided. The house, stability, security. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. Those things weren't gifts. They were leverage. I moved out 2 weeks later. Not dramatically. Just boxes, essentials, and a spare room at a friend's place. James didn't stop me. He said he hoped I'd come to my senses. Maybe I did, because for the first time in years, my choices felt like mine. If this story made you reflect on power and partnership, consider sharing your perspective below. What does equality actually look like in a relationship? The divorce paperwork came 3 months later. By then, I wasn't angry anymore. I was steady. The trip didn't end my marriage. It exposed its foundation. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. If this story resonated with you, like it, comment with one word that describes how it made you feel, and subscribe for more real stories about control, choice, and consequences.